Hey everyone, welcome to the Sober Shift. My name is Joey Batkoski, and this is a space where we get real about recovery, we share stories of hope, and we break the stigma around addiction. Whether you're in recovery, just thinking about it, or you're here for some inspiration, you're in the right place. Let's go ahead and dive in. So, today, what I wanted to do was start with a compelling question. Have you ever caught yourself wondering, do I have a problem with drugs or alcohol? If you have, believe me, you're not alone. And that question actually might be the most important one you ever ask yourself. So, in this video, what I want to do is I want to share some key signs, go through some self assessment questions, and insights from recovery literature to help you find some clarity. So, first thing is, there are some signs that you might have a problem. Ultimately, it's going to be an individual perspective, but here are some common signs of addiction. Do you have an increased tolerance? So, are you needing more of a substance to get the same effect? I know throughout my journey in active addiction, if you want to call it a journey, uh, I would start off with an amount, and towards the end of my addiction, I was spending probably $3,000 a month just to remain at baseline. That wasn't to even get to where I wanted to go. So, increased tolerance, I for sure check that box. Next question you can ask yourself, are you neglecting responsibilities? So, are work, family, or personal goals suffering because of your use? I can say, in my experience, neglecting responsibilities, 1000%. So, work, I was, taking 4 hours for lunch breaks. I eventually decided to switch careers so that I could have an outside sales role. So that way I wasn't in an office, I wasn't chained down, and I was able to kind of go where I wanted to without kind of having the boss looking over my shoulder 24/7. I lost multiple jobs. So work for sure. Family, that was kind of almost my turning point, was that I could just see that I was unmotivated. I didn't really care to be around my family. And when I was just constantly consumed with the thought of, hey, you can leave and go get something else. And personal goals, suffering, to be honest with you, all of my personal goals towards the end of my addiction, I didn't have any. There was no goals. My only goal in life from the moment I opened my eyes open to I put my head back down at sleep was basically mapping out how I was going to get one more and how I was going to avoid getting sick. So, neglecting responsibilities, for sure, check for me. Loss of control. So, have you tried to cut back or quit, but you simply couldn't? I know for me, I tried every single which way to control my use, whether that be just drinking on the weekend, whether that be, hey, I'm not going to have any more liquor, it's only going to be beer. Um, I tried every single thing to have my cake and eat it too, but I simply could not control myself. No matter what was going on, whether something good, something bad, that was what I turned to. That was my solution for everything, was to use. So, loss of control, definitely check mark for me. And then physical or emotional symptoms. So, are you possibly experiencing withdrawal or mood swings? I know when I was using, I was very ignorant. I didn't really understand, especially with opiates. I didn't really understand what withdrawal was. And I remember getting up one morning and just trying to go about my normal life and just feeling so sick. And I was just like, what is this? So I started like getting online, I started Googling, and all of a sudden I started reading about withdrawal symptoms. And like a light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, man, I am physically dependent at this point to using. And that was just a crushing blow to my self-worth and everything, because at that point it was like you weren't hiding this. At least I was physically addicted to this substance. And then emotional symptoms, oh man, I just was a complete and utter wreck, constantly crying, just short fuse, especially with my oldest daughter, with my wife, with my family. I tried to isolate my mood swings. They never knew exactly what person they were going to walk into the room with and how I was going to react. So 100% physical and emotional symptoms, check the box. So I had all four. So those were common signs of addiction. So increased tolerance, neglecting responsibilities, loss of control, and then experiencing maybe some physical or emotional symptoms. I know, like in the supporting literature, especially in the NA basic text, it states that addiction is a physical, mental, and spiritual disease that affects every area of our lives. And then if you want to look at the AA Big Book, it states we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. And I made a video about awareness a couple of videos back. So if you want to go check out the difference between awareness and surrender, you can go check out that video as well. Then, so those are some signs, and then some questions that you could possibly ask yourself. And, maybe I'll link a self-assessment tool in here. But the first question is, do you use substances to cope with stress or emotions? I know for me, that was the answer for absolutely everything, was to use. I mean, no matter what was going on in my life, I didn't want to feel the stress. I didn't want to feel the emotions. I just wanted to be up here 100% of the time. And if I ever started to dip, I wanted to go right back up. So that's one. Do you use substances to cope with some of those stress or emotions? Second question you can ask yourselves: have others expressed a concern about your use? Oh man. So for me, like my lovely wife, she was always early on just kind of like, "Hey, like, should you be drinking that much? It's a Wednesday," or different questions like that. And then my parents would ask me questions about my behavior and things of that nature. And everyone noticed from an early on stage of especially my drinking stages, because when I got into using other substances, I kind of isolated and closed everyone else off so they wouldn't know what I was doing, because I was already ashamed of all the other things that I was doing. But with drinking, it was very noticeable from an early age. I always binge drank. I was the last one who wanted to end the night. Everyone would say, "Hey, I gotta go," and I would always kind of guilt them into staying and drinking more. And I was always there was a goal for me for when I drank. It wasn't to socially drink whatsoever. I didn't even know what that meant. My goal from when I picked up that first drink to the end of the night was just to get severely blackout and to not have any stress or any kind of emotions whatsoever. So definitely people have expressed concern about my use in my past. Third question: do you prioritize using over spending time with loved ones? And as I mentioned earlier on in this video, I did this all the time. Like, I know if one of my buddies, I say buddies, but if one of my using buddies hit me up, I would find every single excuse in the book to either cancel plans with my family or do something completely different so I could get at least 30 minutes to an hour to go do what I needed to do and then come back. So basically, my family was secondary to me during my addiction. I first and foremost, my main priority was to use, and then everything else kind of fell after that. So that was the third question. Fourth question is, do you feel guilty or ashamed about your use? Oh man, yeah. Like, I mean, I would come home, because when I got that outside sales job, I was using pretty much from like 8 in the morning until like 5 p.m. And then I would try and flip a switch and just kind of play house. I would go and pick up my oldest daughter. We would come home, I would cook dinner, and I would try to keep everything under the surface. And then during that time, and then when I would go to bed at night, I just, this sense of guilt, especially when all the substances was wearing off, there was this overwhelming feeling of guilt and shame that just consumed me. And when this happened, of course, it set off another trigger to where I wanted to go and use as quickly as possible, because I didn't want to, sorry, excuse me. I didn't want to sit in those feelings at all. I didn't want to feel what I was actually feeling. So those are the kind of the four questions. Do you use substances to cope with stress or emotions? Have others express concern about your use? Do you prioritize using over spending time with loved ones? And four, do you feel guilty or ashamed about your use? I want to encourage every single person that might be listening to this. These questions are not meant to label you. They're meant to help you gain clarity. So these are questions that you must ask yourself and just be honest with yourself. They're not meant to judge you. They're not meant to label you. I simply hope that someone who's listening to this gets something out of it, helps them gain a little bit of clarity and maybe some courage to take the next step in their recovery journey. So some data and statistics to kind of, make some impact on this is that, one, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, over 20 million Americans struggle with substance use disorder each year. 20 million Americans. That's absolutely crazy statistic. And then the second one, studies show that asking yourself if you have a problem is often one of the first steps towards recovery. So if we can kick somebody's recovery off with simply going through this video and asking themselves these questions and reflecting on their own behavior and use, then my job here is done. That's all I want to do, is help one person out there. So some encouragement and hope. I wanted to offer some reassurance. If you're questioning whether you have a problem, this is definitely a sign of self-awareness and courage. Please remember, addiction is not a moral failing. This is what I thought all the time, was that I just was not a moral and I didn't have values, but addiction is not a moral failing. It is a disease and recovery is possible. So I hope that, like I said, the main goal obviously would be, if you have anyone in your family, if it's yourself, ask yourself these questions, maybe send a link to this video. I also want to encourage a little bit of engagement. So what are your thoughts on these signs? Have you ever asked yourself this question? Please, let's talk in the comments. And then if this video resonated with you at all, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us reach others who might need this message. That's all I have for you today. As always, if no one's told you that they love you today, I love you. Have a blessed day, and we'll talk next time. Thank you very much.